There are normal races, then there's a 24-hour race at Le Mans. Car manufacturers from around the world come to Le Mans to race to test their skills to make the best driving machines for the 24-hour race. This race tests the driver's endurance and the car's endurance for lap after lap, hour after hour. When in 1964, there was two car brands that owned the race for the last 30 years, Porsche and Ferrari. Ferrari won the last 4 years of Le Mans and was storming ahead as being the powerhouse team at Le Mans. Ford was not in the Le Mans at the time, but wanted to expand their program for more than just NASCAR. This would become the rivalry of the ages in motorsport as they battled through the 1960s and to be the king of Le Mans. Director of the film Ford vs. Ferrari, James Mangold, which aired in 2019, he explains that this movie puts you back in the 1960s when racing was dangerous and he had a 1 in 3 chance of dying on the racetrack. There will never be a rivalry like these two teams of Ford and Ferrari at Le Mans in the 1960s, and I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't any more films about this great rivalry. In this speech, I will first explain to you how the film Ford vs. Ferrari was to me. Second, I'll explain how the brief summary of Ford vs. Ferrari in the 1960s at Le Mans. Finally, I'll compare how the film was to the real story of Ford vs. Ferrari. In 2019, the movie Ford vs. Ferrari came out and it was starring Matt Damon and Christian Bale. Making a film like this needs to catch the eyes of every aspect of viewers. A true story or event film needs to be credible to the audience that truly knows about the story being filmed. Also, making a film about a race that most of America doesn't know is a huge risk. With actors like Matt Damon and Carol Shelby and Christian Bale playing Ken Miles, it itself will bring people to the theater as they will always bring people to their fan base and fame. In America, NASCAR is the most main sport with 31 million viewers every Sunday for a race. Bringing this film to America will show a different look on how American motorsport was back in the 1960s. Making a racing film has to be ecstatic and exciting for the whole time, with action and drama at the same time. According to Stephanie Zacharek with Time magazine, Ford vs. Ferrari is a little too long in her opinion. Some scenes leave unnecessary skid marks trails, but the movie still is animal style and energy to spare. It's fast but never furious. This explanation is exactly how I really felt about the film. Even though you need to have long and boring scenes to make a film more credible, for an audience and movie, it will not be pleasing to the majority of the audience. Basing a film on a book is also not a very good idea. This movie was based on the A.J. Baines 2009 book, Go Like Hell, Ford vs. Ferrari, and their battle in speed and glory at Le Mans. During the film, they missed out on main points that I knew from my own knowledge about Ford vs. Ferrari. For an example, the amount of money Henry Ford II spent in the 4 years to beat Enzo Ferrari at Le Mans. He spent in today's money around $300 million to make the perfect car. This film time lapses through the 4 years very fast also. I wish that they've spent more time and details about the evolution of the Ford GT40 over 1964 through 1967 and how it became the best race car at Le Mans at that time. And I wish that they went into more detail after 1967 as Ford went on the decline at Le Mans after the death of Ken Miles, a spoiler alert, and Carol Shelby pointing out of the race team. In the 1960s, Ford Motor Company also was losing money at an enormous rate. They needed a solution for this problem. In 1963, they introduced the Mustang, which brought a sports car to the baby boomers that was fast and affordable. The other solution was to expand on more sports than just NASCAR. Mentioning the 24-hour race in Le Mans was not the idea for Henry Ford. Henry Ford II heard about a small car manufacturer in Italy called Ferrari was going bankrupt. Ferrari was dominating the 24-hour race for the past few years and financially could not afford for the upcoming years of Formula One and Le Mans. Henry Ford took this opportunity to make a huge risk and get himself in Europe and in Le Mans with the purchase of Ferrari. Ford and many of their executives went to the Enzo Ferrari and gave it to Italy then the offer that they could not really refuse. Ford was ready to offer $5 million for the company and have a joint ownership in the motorsport aspect of Ferrari. Ferrari declined the deal after they heard that they would not be in charge of the motorsport aspect of the company. Later that week, Fiat bought Ferrari for the same $5 million, and they have been the owners of Ferrari ever since. After this, Ford became furious and vowed to crush Ferrari at Le Mans. Henry Ford had now had to build a car that would compete with Ferrari at the 24-hour race of Le Mans. Henry Ford then hired Carroll Shelby, who had raced at Le Mans before for Porsche. He gave him a blank check and had no budget. The only thing was that he had to make a car that would beat Ferrari at Le Mans. Shelby then hired, who in his own opinion is the best driver in America, Ken Miles. Ken Miles was the main developer and test driver of the GT40 race car. Over the next 3 years, he then would go through the prototype after prototype, race after race, trying to make the perfect car that would beat Ferrari at Le Mans. In 1967, this was the year that they made the perfect GT40 race car to beat Ferrari, and Ken Miles would be behind the wheel of it. The race of Le Mans was won for the books of Ferrari. The three GT40s that raced won with a 3-2-1 finish, with Ken Miles setting the lap record of 3 minutes and 27 seconds, the lap record at Le Mans until the 1980s. Now that I have talked to you what the film was compared to the actual story, I want to go into more detail in the 1960s between Ford and Ferrari. The film was not really making scenes and more dramatic in what they were in real life. It's making an action movie or more of a documentary. Zacharek says that in Time magazine, for a person who hasn't been on behind the wheel of a car since 1986, I am uncommonly nuts about old-fashioned, well-shot and edited movie stunts of driving. The Ford vs. Ferrari has lots of it. Making the film more of a documentary of adding better scenes would appeal better to the Motorhead crowd, which would be more of the audience going to see this at home. The movie is over 2.5 hours long, and it only has about 15 minutes of actual racing scenes. They should have had more racing scenes and not scenes that made the movie feel slow. They should have had more scenes about the death of Ken Miles and how Ford did after 1967 Le Mans. And then maybe also something about Carroll Shelby talking about Le Mans. Even though he has passed away, I have seen in films Shelby talking about Le Mans and Miles, and now that he was his best friend in the best time of his life. It would saying through scenes also through Ferrari's eyes would make the film more credible, in my opinion. It will make the movie very interesting and more entertaining to the view of Le Mans through Enzo Ferrari and other teams at Le Mans. They went through a struggle as well, making their car the P3, which would compete against the GT40, and losing the best driver of the race in 1967, a German racer. Scenes like this would make the film more entertaining and please the motorhead, which is me, the audience, and possibly the fans of the actors in the movie. Through this speech, I have explained how the film was, in my opinion, knowing the story through my first place. Second, I have told you a brief story how Ford versus Ferrari was at Le Mans in 1960. Finally, I have compared the film to what really happened and gave my opinion on what they should have done to make the movie better. Making films like this is hard for a producer and director. You have to please the entire audience, and you probably won't. But this was a film, in my opinion, that will go down as one of the best driving and racing films of all time.